Good morning. My name is Marlies Singh, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at Mainline Unitarian Church. I am very happy to welcome all of you here and everyone who is watching at home. I am joined today by our worship team that includes the Reverend McKinley Sims as our guest minister. Reverend Sims is the minister of UUs of Mount Airy, a historically Universalist congregation in Northwest Philadelphia. He hails from West Texas and is the proud owner of a very prolific Tulsi plant named St. Basil. The other members of the worship team are Dawn Star Sarah Borscheltz, Director of Lifespan Faith Development, Michael Cohen, Worship Associate, and our musical guest, Justin Soloninka. A warm welcome to those of you who are visitors here. We're delighted you chose to come. After the service, please join us for coffee hour in the fireside room. We would love to learn more about you and what you are searching for. Please go to the welcome table in the lobby or to our website, mluc.org, or contact our membership coordinator at jessica@mluc.org to learn more about us. We are Unitarian Universalists. We affirm religious freedom and celebrate diversity. We are a caring community united by our values rather than our beliefs. We join in a community of faith to transform our lives, care for each other, become our best selves, and build a more just, compassionate, and equitable world. I would like to invite you to a few activities this week, and please make sure you look in your order of service. There's a lot going on. For those of you who enjoy group singing, we have an in-person and virtual folk sing this Saturday at 7:45. And if you are looking for ways to serve on Sundays, there are several opportunities to participate in our time together. We can use all the help we can get. Please sign up on Sign Up Genius. We need greeters, welcomers, ushers, or people who bring in snacks for coffee time. So please sign up for any one of those things or for all of them together on the same Sunday. Challenge yourself. Now we will hear from Barbara Colton on the nominating committee with another announcement.
Hi, good morning. It's nice to see everyone on this bright, sunny day, although it's a little cold. I'm here to talk about our call for recommendations for search committee. Starting this week, we are starting the process to select the 7 members that will be part of the search committee responsible for selecting our new minister, actually on behalf of all of us. This committee will comprise 7 people who will be responsible for going through a process to understand what we're looking for in a minister and engaging with us as a congregation and also with ministers that they meet in the process of interviewing. As our representative, it is very important that this committee be representative of us and trusted by us. So we are asking each of you, all of the church members, to recommend individuals that you trust to serve on this committee. The nominating committee and the board would like to see everyone step forward, share your voice, be heard, and be represented. So the question is, who do you trust to choose our next minister? You can recommend yourself, someone else, or maybe you know a number of people that you would like to recommend. You may recommend as many people as you want. Please take a minute or two and recommend these people to us. It only takes a minute or two. We have a table in the atrium where we'll take your recommendations in paper form, online, or even just talk to Joanne Rose or Rick Jors, who are also members of the nominating committee, and they'll be happy to talk to you about your recommendations. On behalf of the nominating committee, we appreciate your taking this time to do this. It's a very important part of the process for strengthening our church and preparing us to go forward for the future. The call for recommendations officially opens today, and it only lasts 2 weeks, so we encourage you all to make those decisions and put forward your recommendations as soon as possible. The online access is available on the website over the next 2 weeks. And if you're on Zoom, Valerie Saris is there to answer any questions, and she'd be happy to pass along the link so you can do the online recommendations as well. If you have questions, I look forward to seeing you in the atrium, hopefully for a few minutes before you grab your coffee and little snack. Thank you so much.
I also want to come back to the subject of visitors, and I just want to say how very happy we are that today we have a member of the family from Afghanistan whom we are sponsoring here with us at MLUC, and we are very thrilled that he could come, Muhammad. And if later during coffee hour you might step up and welcome him in person. Now at this time, please take a moment to silence your electronic devices and join me in reciting our mission statement. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith. We will light the chalice now.
I'd like to invite my colleagues Robin Slaw and Isabella Weber to come forward to light our chalice this morning. Robin and Isabella are here with us this weekend along with 14 teachers who are being trained as facilitators for junior and senior high OWL in their congregations and communities. Welcome to all of you. I've already spent most of the weekend with you, but that's why a lot of visitors are here today. Thanks.
Good morning. We light this chalice for the renewal of our faith, and these words are by Reverend Suzelle Lynch. Each time we light the chalice, we renew our commitment to our Unitarian Universalist faith. With the spark of a match, we make it new again, as fresh and surprising as the first day we encountered this spiritual community and realized we were home. We light this chalice for renewal of our faith.
Good morning. I'll make sure my microphone is on. Is that coming out all right for you in the back? Yes. Fabulous. Our call to worship this morning echoes the words of the poet Rumi. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, though you've broken your promises, your covenants, your hopes, come yet again, come back into this. Friends, if you can't tell, I'm from West Texas. I carry this little multi-tool with me wherever I go. It's a reminder of my grandfather who helped raise me. On it is an inscription from the Hebrew Bible that reminds me to be strong and courageous and do the work. Be strong and courageous and do the work. Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, be strong and courageous and do the work. Come, yet again come. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. We're talking about liberation theologian James Cone today. He once wrote, "Indeed, survival and liberation depend upon our recognition of the truth when it is spoken and lived by the people. If we cannot recognize the truth, then it cannot liberate us from untruth. Truth is divine action entering our lives and creating the human act of liberation. There is no liberation without truth. There is no truth without strength and courage and doing the work. Come, yet again come." Let's begin worship.
Microphones and masks are very tricky. There we go. I learned the story I'm going to tell you today from a religious educator named Connie Dunn. And as far as I can tell from the sources I have, it's probably a Sufi teaching tale. The Sufis are mystical orders within Islam, but I wasn't able to find out much more about it than that. A butterfly starts out as an egg, which hatches into a larva. You may not be able to see this very well, but it's a leaf with some theoretical butterfly eggs on it, which grows into a caterpillar. And I imagine some of you know this already, but follow along. Here's a caterpillar. And when the caterpillar begins to change into a butterfly, it turns into a chrysalis. And inside that chrysalis, the caterpillar turns itself into a pile of goo, and then somehow the goo reforms itself into a butterfly. In the chrysalis stage, it's hard to see if what's inside there is dead or alive, but if you find the chrysalis at just the right time, you can see a small opening and you can see the butterfly starting to emerge. And that's what happened once upon a time to a man who found a chrysalis. He sat and watched for several hours as the butterfly inside struggled to force its body through the opening. And when it got to the point where it appeared to him that the butterfly could go no further, the man decided he should help. So he took out a pair of scissors and he snipped off the remaining bit of the chrysalis. And then the butterfly emerged easily. But it had a swollen body and small, shriveled wings. The man watched because he expected that at any moment the wings would enlarge and expand to support the body, which would contract in time. But it didn't happen. In fact, this butterfly spent the rest
of its life crawling around, unable to fly, with a swollen body and shriveled up little wings. It was never able to fly because it came out of the chrysalis too soon. Because what the man in his kindness and his haste didn't understand was that the restriction of the chrysalis and the struggle required for the butterfly to get through the little opening were Allah's way of forcing fluid from the body of the butterfly into its wings so that it would be ready for flight once it achieved its liberation from the chrysalis. Without the struggle, without the obstacle, it would never be ready to fly. I wonder what would have actually helped the butterfly. I think maybe keeping predators away while it was struggling, having food ready for it when it emerged. I wonder if you've ever had to learn something or grow some way that was a really big struggle in order to become more free. Allah is how you say God in Arabic, and this story reflects an Islamic prayer. I asked for strength, and Allah gave me difficulties to make me strong. I asked for wisdom, and Allah gave me problems to solve. I asked for prosperity, and Allah gave me brain and brawn to work. I asked for courage, and Allah gave me danger to overcome. I asked for love, and Allah gave me troubled people to help. I asked for favors, and Allah gave me opportunities. I received nothing I wanted, but I received everything I needed. So blessed be Allah, the best of creators. May we receive what we need, and may those we wish to help also receive what they need and not what we want. I'm going to invite the children to come out to the atrium with me. We're doing things in a little bit different spaces today because of the owl training, but I will explain that when we get out there. Thank you very much.
Morning. Each month we select a local charity to be MLUC's offering outreach partner, and that means that one half of what we collect during the weekly offering goes to that local charity. And in the month of March, the offering outreach partner at MLUC is the Women's Law Project of Southeastern Pennsylvania. Now, this organization has been in existence for more than 4 decades and is at the forefront of key legal and public policy issues involving women's reproductive rights and health care. They work to provide access to safe and lawful abortion, they defend against workplace discrimination, and they provide free legal assistance to low-income pregnant and parenting clients. If you would like to, if you're watching remotely and you'd like to contribute, you can use the Give link on the MLUC website. You can also text your offering by following the instructions that you see on the screen within your Zoom meeting. And if you're here and you'd like to text instead of reach into your pocket, you can certainly do that as well. Thank you, Justin, for that awesome music, by the way. And thank you all for your generosity with your donations. These gifts will help our church, our community make a difference in the world. This is the part of our service, as you know, called Candles of Community. It's the time that we share our joys and sorrows in a safe and supporting environment of our church. After each candle is lit, please join me in saying, "We hold you in our hearts." We light our first candle today for the country and citizens of Ukraine. The destruction of innocent lives, property, and society in Ukraine is a tragedy that harkens back memories of the World War in the 1940s that devastated much of the European continent. For those people, for the people of Ukraine, including those who live there, those who have evacuated the country, those who are taking up arms to defend their country, and the families of those who are affected, we hold you in our hearts. Ann Bear Clark would like to have a candle of concern lit for Elba Dorley, whose sister Anna Santamarina died suddenly this past week. For Elba, her family, and for Ann, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle for Alice Marsloff, who is recovering from a severe skin reaction from the radiation treatments that she's having to treat her breast cancer. Alice, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle for Barbara Thomas, who is in Hackettstown, New Jersey, and is recovering from shoulder surgery. Barbara, we are holding you in our hearts. And for the joys and sorrows that are unspoken and too deep for words, we light one more candle. Amen. I urge white theologians, ministers, and other morally concerned persons to break their silence immediately and continuously. It is immoral to see evil and not fight it. As Rabbi Prinz put it, bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problems. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. Theologians and ministers, churches, synagogues, and associations must not remain onlookers, that is, silent in the face of hate, in the face of brutality, and in the face of mass murder. We must speak out loud and clear against the evil of racism, not for the sake of black, poor, but for ourselves, for our churches, for our theologies, for America and the world, and most of all, for humanity. In America, we have a lot of racist theologies. Let us hope that white theologians, ministers, and other concerned human beings will end their silence about the evil consequences of racism, so they can join people of color in their fight against white supremacy and connect the struggles in the United States and in the fight for justice around the world. Now let's have a moment of reflection.
Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. See that host all dressed in white, God's gonna trouble the water. The leader looks like the Israelite. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. See that band all dressed in red. God's gonna trouble the water. It looks like the band that Moses led. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. If you don't believe I've been redeemed, God's gonna trouble the water. Just follow me down to Jordan's stream. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
I'm from West Texas, and it's taken me a long time to be proud of saying that. If you know anything about Texas, you know that it's a different place than some of the people in this room might be familiar with. And when I tell people that I am from the second most conservative congressional district in America, 16 years running, and that I'm proud to be from there, I always get strange looks. Some of you are giving me that strange look right now. I'm used to it, but the truth is I used to be ashamed of it. I used to be ashamed of my family for who they supported in elections. I used to be ashamed of how we lived our lives when I did not know better. When it seemed like we abandoned the faith that I grew up in. I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian church, and here I am today. That tells you something about my journey. But I will say that it was a great place to grow up. It's a great place to be from, especially for a white Euro-American male boy with middle-class money and the privilege that comes with being athletic, able-bodied, and light-skinned. But my family dysfunction aside, and my recognition of who I am and my social location, it might be interesting for some of us to hear that, for me to define myself that way. But when you grow up in a place where I grew up, the whiteness is the norm, and everything else is different. So the hardest part about growing up in West Texas for me was worrying about whether the weather was going to change and whether or not I could go outside and shoot baskets after school, what my next school test was going to be. And for me personally, the hardest part about growing up in West Texas was around this time, when college basketball was coming to its conclusion, and everything is very exciting, and we enter a season in the Christian church called Lent. Or if you're from where I'm from, you pronounce it Lent. I grew up in a church that celebrated Lent, and if you're not familiar, it's the period before Easter in the Christian calendar. We've got some of my UCC colleagues here, so I'm happy to do some translation and making it work for them. It's the period before Easter, when we are called to contemplate mortality. That famous phrase, remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. When I was little, that sounded pretty morbid. I didn't really want to think about the dust, especially because if you know anything about West Texas, it is a very dusty place. I was all too familiar. The practice of Lent, as it was described to me, is one of giving up something. Giving up something. Giving up vices is what it was usually described as. Giving up coffee or chocolate or sweets or lying, giving up bad habits. The idea was you were supposed to give up something because you were trying to think ahead that, well, eventually I'm going to have to give up my life, or at least my belief that I'm going to live forever. Right? You're contemplating death. And the idea was to make life in the giving up more meaningful by taking up your transient time here. To give up sin in favor of life with a capital L, and salvation. That language may not resonate for all of us the way it did for me back then. Some of us have been on a journey and grown and changed. And that's all right, because that's the story of Unitarian Universalism, right? If you don't know anything about UU churches, you had the Unitarians and the Universalists, and in the 60s they linked up like Voltron and became the UUA that we know today. So a lot of UUs, we don't talk about sin or salvation or practice the season of Lent, to be honest, right? But where I'm from, we talk about it constantly. Sin and salvation were never very far away. And in the season of Lent, remembering that we are dust, and to dust we shall return, you're constantly called to this challenge of trying to live in today. I learned a lot about sin. I learned a lot about salvation. I learned a lot about Lent. I learned a lot about dust. I did not learn a lot about James Cone. James Cone is one of the founders of Black liberation theology. He was a Christian minister. He taught at Union Seminary in New York. He was famous for his work on Black liberation theology, especially through the lens of jazz music. So if you're not familiar with James Cone, I invite you to check him out. He's one of the most influential theologians on my life and my theology. And the reading that Michael read earlier is from a letter that James Cone wrote. And it's called "The White Church's Greatest Sin." A term that he used was white supremacy is the church's greatest sin. That phrase may do something for you if you have not heard it before, or if you've heard it in a very specific context. White supremacy. You might be saying, what? That's not a church problem. That's a KKK problem. That's the South problem. That's probably a Texas problem. I can tell you, I'm familiar. One of the things that we do in Unitarian Universalist congregations that grows out of our theological heritage is to take things that were meant to be communal and make them individual. And there's a movement in the UUA to reclaim some of that communal understanding. So when I said the phrase white supremacy, I'm not just talking about people who wear hoods and run around doing cowardly acts of terrorism. I'm talking about a communal system, a larger philosophy of the way that this country was founded, of a way that Texas was founded, that permeates all of our systems. And the shift of thinking about persons, white supremacists, to a system of white supremacy, a culture of white supremacy, that's a hard move for some of us to make. It was a hard move for me to make, to wrap my head around that. Because I'm from a very conservative place, and I'd like to think that I've moved past a lot of those really harmful ideas. I consider myself a good progressive liberal boy. I joined a Unitarian Universalist church. I bought the movie Black Panther on Blu-ray. I've been to the Jubilee training, right? I've done it. I'm all set. In the place I grew up with, we have the practice of baptism. right? Where you enter into the community, it's the ritual cleansing for the forgiveness of sins, the Jewish mikvah. I gave up on the idea of what baptism is necessary for, especially in UU spaces, but I still kind of had that idea of baptism in my head, especially when it came to anti-racism. I thought, well, I've done the thing. I've taken the shower, and I am clean, clean, clean. I'm all set. The Universalist side of our heritage also had two camps. On one side, you had the ultra-universalist, often called the death and glory universalist. They said, God is so good, God would never condemn anyone forever. Salvation is for everyone. Sin has no power over your life ultimately. And that was a very popular theology in the 1800s. And then people saw the horrors of slavery in the American Civil War, and they looked around and they said, wait a second, somebody got to pay for this. And another tradition rose up, the Restorationist. And they looked around and said, yeah, they said, God is good, and no one is going to be condemned forever. But if you were really bad, you got to spend some time in the penalty box. The church I serve at now is historically called the Universalist Church of the Restoration. It comes out of that theological schism of what do we do when we mess up? How are we restored? How do we make up for it? I am a restorationist, but I did not know it until I became a UU. I am a restorationist, even though I had the idea of the ultra-universalist who said, if you are baptized and take the ritual shower, you are clean, clean, clean. When it came to thinking about anti-racism, which we talk a lot about in UU spaces, I still had this baptismal model. I did my Jubilee training. I'm all set. Nothing can separate me from the love of God. But I'm a restorationist. And another way of thinking about the restorationist model, not just of salvation or afterlife, but here, now, and how we care for one another and how we move through the world, especially people who look like me, who sound like me, European, Americans, white folks. The other model of how to do anti-racism work, how to fight against a culture of white supremacy, is not just taking the one ritual shower and being done, but it's what comedian Jay Smoove calls the dental hygiene model of anti-racism. If you had something stuck in your teeth because you didn't brush your teeth this morning, you would want someone to tell you, correct? Yes, and every day we're supposed to brush our teeth a little bit to clean off that stuff. Jay Smoove posits that this is how racism and white supremacy culture work for us today. That it's not just a one-time thing, it's something you have to do every day, often, continuously. Theologian James Cone wrote, talking about how to destroy white supremacy is a daily task, not just for consultations and conferences or when there's a guest minister in your pulpit. If we only talk about white supremacy at special occasions, the problem will never be solved. Black folks do not have the luxury of just dealing with racism in church meetings or academic settings. If that were true, it wouldn't be so bad. No day passes in which black folks don't have to deal with white supremacy. It is found everywhere, in the churches, in the seminaries, in the publishing houses, in the government, and all around the world. There is no escape. When I first heard that, I was like, oh, do we have to keep saying this? It's kind of exhausting. I struggled brushing my teeth twice a day, every day. This is more of a challenge. And then I read these words from James Cone. If whites get tired of talking about race, just imagine how exhausted people of color must feel. It is not easy. It is a very difficult endeavor. Yet, do not be discouraged. Despair only supports the enemy. And working together with each other and with what James Cone calls the great spirit of the universe, we can accomplish more than we have ever dreamed. Those words were written 35 to 40 years ago. The commendation to people who are fighting, who are struggling, who are learning, who are trying to do better. The people who come from places where I come from and learn to grow. And when you know better, to do better. That's what I talk about a lot with my folks. I say, y'all, James Cone was right. He was right. White supremacy is the greatest struggle, the greatest challenge for the church, for UU churches, for Americans, for the world. It's uncomfortable, it's frustrating, it's so big to think about, it's hard to wrap your mind around it. But he was right. If you're from where I'm from, you know that to be true. So when we talk about the season of Lent, most UUs don't practice it, but if you are on social media, there is something called UU Lent. It's an invitation to meditate on a different word each day, to share pictures of social media, but also to go deeper and to do reflection. So I'm asking you today, I'm inviting you to give up something. I'm inviting you to give up discomfort if hearing about race makes you feel uncomfortable. I'm inviting you to give up the denial that I have felt about whether white supremacy is a real thing and whether or not we should be talking about it in congregations. I'm inviting you to give up defensiveness at this goofy-looking minister who comes in with boots and his disheveled hair. I get that a lot. I'm inviting you to give up ways of thinking about the world that no longer serve us, that thinking about the world only in terms of individuals, white supremacists, people in hoods, people who vote that way, people who live in that place, and to think about it in terms of systems that affect all of us, regardless of our intentions, regardless of how many times we saw Black Panther or the Green Book. To give up those things that are no longer serving us and to take up something new, something that is life-giving, something that is salvational, something that is liberating. We cannot be liberated from untruth without the truth. And the truth about injustice may sound outrageous. What I ask my people to do is in everything, in our justice work, in our Sunday mornings, in our OWL trainings, when we go to the grocery store, when we make decisions about what we're going to buy, when we watch the news, to always ask this question: where is race present in this? Where is race present in this? I'll give you a very clear example. A couple of Thursdays ago, I was sitting in an anti-racism conference, this is no lie, planning for voter outreach for the 2022 midterms. And I checked my phone and I saw that Russia is invading Ukraine. And my stomach dropped and I started to tear up. My sister-in-law was born in Kyiv, moved here when she was 4. And I had this reaction, palpable reaction. Maybe some of you have felt this way for the past 2 weeks. It's awful. And then I had to stop and think, Why is it just this that's affecting me this way? Why is it not what's going on in Somalia, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, across the world? Why is it when it's light-skinned, blue-eyed people who kind of look like me that it affects me so much more? I mean, you minister. I'd like to think I'm as liberal and progressive as it gets. It's a daily struggle. Asking the question, where is race in this? And then asking the follow-up question. So what does my faith call me to do about it? Where are my values of justice, inclusion, compassion, of recognizing that we are interconnected and interdependent? And then finally ask, what am I learning from this? Where am I in the butterfly, chrysalis, caterpillar metaphor? Where is my struggle? Do I have to admit some things that I don't want to admit? Do I have to recognize that maybe I'm not as ritually clean as I thought I was? That maybe I have to brush my teeth every day? If you are like me, you find this so hard because I don't like to make mistakes, and I don't like to be seen as one of those people from West Texas. I have a really hard time being seen as that person. And so I struggle against it. And any crack in the armor, any mistake I make, if I say the wrong thing or don't say the right thing, it takes me back to that shame. It takes me right back. And I feel like I need to be cleaned. So I want to invite you to take up a new practice. An invitation to working against this idea of perfectionism, which is one of the prime symptoms of what we call a culture of white supremacy. The idea that we need to be perfect, that we can't make mistakes, and to give it up for this Lent. To give it up and take up something new. We talked about the ultra-universalist who said, you're good, you don't have to do anything. We talked about the restorationist who said, yeah, you got to do some work, but you're good. Don't get me wrong, you are absolutely good, and you got to do some work. The restorationists had a theological theory. The inevitable human progress onwards and upwards forever. The inevitable human progress of the human soul onwards and upwards forever. Some people looked at this and they said, well, it just means humanity is going to keep getting better and better and better until we achieve the perfect society. That's what a lot of us think it means now. But what they meant was that after death, the human soul will continue to progress onward and upward, being restored forever. That even with the end of something, even with death, that was not defeat, that was not the end. You are but dust, and to dust you shall return. I'm a restorationist. I believe in progress onward and upward forever, including up to and especially beyond death. Not just for individuals, but for a system, for a community, for a culture. I think if we give up some of the things that we have held on to as UUs, as UCC folks, about ideas, progressive politics, culture, and embrace the hard work of undoing white supremacy, listening to our leaders of color, onward and upward forever. Friends, I invite you to partake in Lent. Even if it's just UU Lent and is posting pictures, that's a great place to start. I invite you to go on a journey from the caterpillar to the chrysalis to the butterfly, to struggle with these concepts. When someone comes up here and talks about anti-racist, anti-oppressive work, and you just want to check out because you've done it before. I invite you to give up those ways of thinking that are no longer serving you and no longer serving us, and to take up the framework of the liberation theologians like James Cone. Let us hope that white theologians, ministers, and other concerned human beings, everyone in this room who's white, will end their silence about the evil consequences of racism so they can join people of color in the fight against white supremacy and connect the struggles in the USA with the fight for justice around the world. We are interconnected, interdependent, a web of all existence. And not one of us can do it all by themselves. But if all of us can learn to struggle and wrestle and brush our teeth, what would it be like for butterflies to take flight? What a world that would be. As dusty as it is, I think it'd be beautiful. May it be so, friends. Amen. If you're feeling some type of way, I have been there. I'm with you. I hear you. I see you. I got you. If you want to talk afterwards, please come find me. Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again, come. Friends, we're not called to be perfect. We're called to be human, to learn, to know better, and then to do better. If you're feeling despair, you're feeling upset, I hear you, I see you, I got you. Be strong and courageous and do the work. be strong and courageous, and do the work. Go in peace, friends. Thank you.